to make sure that you're giving us your feedback as we've been doing throughout this process. I know we have, and I'm delighted we have most of our actually Community Center Task Force members on this call. And if I start naming them, I know that I'm going to miss somebody. And if we were in full view of everybody, or as many people as we could, I would ask them to do handshakes so that we'd know who they are. But we do have most of them on, and I'm really grateful to each and every one of you for the work that you're doing. And so thank you very much. We do have our chairs of our subcommittees on this call as well. I think Matt Rule is on, and he chairs the Finance Subcommittee, and Greg Comfort is on. He chairs the Facilities and Partnership Subcommittee, and I believe Supin is on, and she chairs the Community Engagement Subcommittee. So again, welcome, thanks to all, and I believe I'm going to turn it over to the consultants and they can introduce themselves.
Yeah, thanks, Margie. Hi, everybody. My name is Aaron Dominy. I'm a principal with OHM, and I'm going to be leading us through the program here tonight. We do have a couple other consultants from the consultant team with us. Nan Weir with Williams Architects is on the line with us as well, and Rick Fay from OHM is also with us tonight. So really pleased to see a lot of familiar names and familiar faces that we've met along the journey through this project, whether at a pop-up or one of the focus groups who we talked to earlier today. It's great to see the community come back and join us as we continue to work through this really important process. Tonight's an exciting night for us because we get to share with the community a lot of the good work that we've been doing. This is an overview of the presentation today. It's going to kind of start with a quick overview of the project. I know that a number of you are pretty familiar with the project and what's been happening. Always good to check in and kind of revisit what's been done and where we're at, and also where we're going. We'll spend a little bit of time talking about what has happened since our last meeting. So a lot of good work's happened throughout the process, and we want to revisit some of that with you because it's really meaningful and informs some of the important information we're going to share with you today. And that is going to be starting to talk about the program for the community center, a draft program, essentially what is going into the community center. And then we'll actually start to look at some of the locations that have been identified and some preliminary development concepts for how the community center may even sit on those locations. So a really important milestone for us to start to work through tonight with you is before we keep moving forward in the process. We're going to engage you along the way. So there'll be a couple of points during the program where we are going to do some polling. So you will be able to give us feedback that way. And you'll also be assigned some small groups as we get towards the end of the presentation, where you'll be in breakout rooms for about 12 minutes or so, kind of talking through the content before you answer a final set of questions. So it's kind of a light program from the engagement side, but we have to keep it lean and mean as we're all now functioning in the virtual environment, but there will be plenty of times for you to provide feedback to us. Margie did a great job kind of introducing the task force team who we've been working with, the consultant team, which is led by Williams Architects, Nan Weir, who's on the call, who's the project manager, Pros Consulting, and OHM. So that's the core consultant team that's been working with you through this journey. I think it's always fun to point out that Nan is not only your project manager, but also a resident. And Rick and I both live here in Central Ohio, so we kind of call this area home. While UA is not home, we're not too far away. So today you kind of get to sit back and relax and listen to the program, start to learn about the program, the development of the sites, some conceptual vignettes, and then we'll start to talk as a group about what you see, what you think, what your reactions are. So in terms of the project overview, I think it's important to check in and revisit how we approach this project. And the task force gave us some really good direction here, and that was to break this down into two phases. Phase one was really trying to understand if this community center was needed. Does the community have a need for this type of facility within Upper Arlington? And is it desired? Is there support for the community center? That was phase one. We're actually now in phase two, which starts to look at the programming, the locations, operations, and ultimately funding for the community center. So I'll explain a little bit more about how those two phases came together. Here's the linear journey that we've been on. I always put it into the context of the marathon. So we're about mile 16 or 17 here. And we're in phase two. Today, we worked with a number of focus groups to get input. And we also did that yesterday. We're here at the community meeting. And then there'll be community surveys that are coming out after this meeting to engage the community as well. So there's been a lot that's been done before this point in time. Some of that I'll go through with you, but I'm not going to go through every step on this slide. I just wanted to point out kind of where we're at in the overall process. There's been a lot happening right now, and there's a lot to come. So a lot of work's been happening at that facilities and partnership subcommittee of the task force. The facilities subcommittee is really dealing with, the program, the locations, and what those partners are that need to be also at the table to help this take shape within the community. So their last meeting was October 5th. We had 2 rounds of focus groups yesterday and today. Talked to some great folks within your community. We're at the community meeting here. There'll be some subcommittees happening now through January. We have a community survey rolling out, which will be number 2, which will be the second statistically valid survey that gets rolled out as part of the process. And then we're all working towards a council presentation in December. And the goal right now is to take one recommendation. So that's kind of one program, one location, and one package that goes with that from the operation, funding, that type of thing. So that's headed towards council in December as of now, with the final report delivered in January. So what's been happening since our last meeting? Well, we finished that first round of engagement. So that phase 1 community engagement was complete. Together with a lot of other technical work that went into understanding facility needs in the community. We then started to work on the program. So what goes into the community center? We've looked at locations, a number of locations, which I'll share with you tonight. We've scored those locations through a set of criteria, which the community actually helped inform that criteria and how it was developed. And we've selected a couple of preferred locations. So that's kind of the exciting part, to unveil that to you all tonight and get your feedback on that. Okay, so we're back on track. Sorry about that little malfunction, but thanks for your feedback there. Looks like the majority of you feel it's very clear in terms of where we're going and what's been done. So I'm gonna keep moving forward here. So part of that first round of engagement, as a quick reminder, we talked to a number of stakeholders within the community. That included Parks and Rec staff, focus groups. So within those focus groups, we had recreation, community groups, lifelong learning, arts and culture, seniors, business, community, and active sports. So 41 in all as part of that first round of engagement. We did a number of community pop-ups. There's some task force members. You might recognize Bill Westbrook there in the right photo. So those were 12 small community events that were conducted throughout the community. Talked to about 500 residents, nearly 500 residents through this exercise. And so that was very helpful to get feedback. A lot of this feedback that came through this process helped us answer the questions on the need, on the level of support, and ultimately what's important as part of the program. At a large community meeting back when we were all still gathering together, that was at the senior center on the right, and then you see your task force working there on the left. So just more documentation in terms of what's been done as part of that phase 1. The needs assessment survey was really important. So that helped us understand not only the need, but that level of support. So this was conducted as part of that phase 1. It was a 95% confidence level survey that was initiated with about a 4% margin of error. So this gave us a lot of good direction in addition to more of that in-person feedback. So here we were asking, what is your level of support for a community center if it's funded without a tax increase? So here you can see the responses from your community. You might have seen this data before if you were at some previous meetings. About 80% supportive, 13% unsupportive, and 7% were neutral. So pretty strong indicator from that survey point. So moving on, if there was a tax increase, what was the level of support? 54% were supportive and 33% unsupportive, with 12% being neutral. And some of the commentary around that 12%, some of the comments that were given at that time was, I'm neutral because I need to learn more. And I'm curious to see how it would be funded, where it would be situated, what would it look like? And so that, this together was also a pretty strong indicator for the task force. So phase one ended with two key milestones that really led us forward. And the first one was the question, is there support for a community center? And based on all the work that we did and presented to the task force, their direction or their call on that was yes, we do believe there's support for a community center in Upper Arlington. And then the second part was, how should it be programmed? And more on that in a moment. There was a number of things that were done to help us get to the point where we had a program. And that came from the meetings, and it also came from some of the input on the survey. So those included a number of things that went into the program. You'll see here athletics on the left. Of the athletics, this was really important. This came from a number of key inputs and really gave us direction on the importance of this athletic component. So this included volleyball, things like volleyball, badminton, basketball, pickleball. What this all means is this is hard court surface activity. You'll see that in the program and some of the concepts as I unfold them here in a little bit. The other was aquatics. So this was something that I think we had to dig into a little bit. Knowing you have some great aquatic facilities in Upper Arlington, one on the way with the schools. What we learned here was that there was pretty strong support for indoor aquatics as part of the facility. One of the other things we know as a team is that this is an important component too from an operational standpoint and from a funding standpoint to keep the facility working and financially viable. These are great income drivers. So this became part of the program as well. Exercise, so gym, fitness was also extremely important. And with that, some idea of adventure play. So are there places where there's rooms for kids to do things like American Ninja Warrior? Could it be a CrossFit room? A lot of things went into the idea of creating kind of that adventure play space. Additionally, group fitness. So some multi-purpose rooms for things like yoga, aerobics, Pilates, making sure we have those multi-purpose fitness areas in the program as well. Seniors. This was a really important core element of discussion and also of the program. So with the senior component, one thing that we did learn, and this came out of some of the focus groups with the seniors, together with some of the community input meetings, was that really strong desire to have the seniors as a component of the facility, but also give them some independent space. And so you'll see how that sets itself up in the facility as I unfold it here in a little bit again. So the other item was cultural, so arts and crafts, meeting space. That arts and crafts can be things like small classes, but that can also be intergenerational as well. And then moving on, just multi-use areas. So a lot of comments just from people asking for flexibility. So can we have spaces in the facility for things like art exhibitions? Is there a cafe? Can there be culinary classes, community events? And then inclusivity was also part of that comment as well. So can we accommodate adaptive sports here? And can that be part of the program? Lastly is youth. This came through pretty strong as well, making sure we have opportunities for all ages of youth, from everything from childcare, kids activities, up to teen areas, and things like gaming even kind of rose to the top. I know I mentioned earlier, and I've learned recently that, well, we used to play video games when I was younger. Now gaming's really taking hold. Kids are getting scholarships for gaming. So is that something that can be integrated too? Maybe not on day one, but is there space for that to grow within the facility? So where does the community center go within Upper Arlington? We ultimately got at a preferred site selection or site selections, multiple sites, and that went through a series of criteria, which I'll share with you today. And then we ultimately started to look at some conceptual design on some of those preferred locations. So we are at this checkpoint here. So one thing you may have noticed about the process is that it's very iterative. We're coming to the community, we're getting feedback, we're going away, we're coming back, we're getting feedback. So we're at a checkpoint, meaning we need your feedback to understand how to proceed moving forward on the locations. So we looked at a number of sites. We had Northwest Kiwanis, Burbank Park, Thompson Park, Reed Road Park, Fancyburg, Northam, Kingsdale, which was the one non-city owned parcel, MSC, and Sunny 95. So these sites were identified in part by the consultant team, but also by the task force. And so that was a group effort to kind of identify these sites as part of the process. I also want to point out that you'll see these red lines. So we try to divide the city into thirds, not perfectly, but kind of a north, a central, and a south. And that'll make sense here in a second as why you see those red lines there. So of all of these sites, we evaluated them based on a set of criteria. The criteria, as you see there on the left of the slide, included a number of factors. That criteria came from the input that we got through phase one. Some of that was provided by the task force, but the majority was them creating that criteria based on what we heard the community say. So site control, protecting existing parkland, very strong indicator from phase one that the community did not want to eat up existing green parkland if possible. Ability for creative funding, accessible to all modes of transportation, meaning can you walk and can you ride your bike to the location? Does it support multi-generational uses and access? And finally, is it centrally located? That was another big theme from the first phase, that the more accessible from a central location, the better. This is the scoring. I'm not expecting you to see all of these numbers, but what I want just trying to illustrate is that this did go through a process of getting evaluated, getting scored based on the criteria I just showed you. And from that, the Kingsdale location and the municipal site, the MSC site, scored the highest through that evaluation criteria. And you'll see those two sites there. They are both centrally located. One a little bit more central than the other, but they kind of fall within that central zone as we identified it. And they scored pretty close. So the next step then was to look at these two sites a little bit more carefully. And we took more of your feedback from phase one, and we expanded the criteria to include a lot more, a lot of other metrics, things like neighborhood compatibility. Does the site have the ability to expand if needed? Vehicle access, walk bike access, parking. Does it achieve other community economic goals? I'm just bouncing around here trying to tell the story that there was another layer of analysis that went into looking at these two sites, and then the scoring kind of there on the bottom. Again, not expecting you to see all those numbers, but what I do want to share with you is that when it went through that second round of evaluation, they were very close. Within 2 or 3 points from a scoring standpoint. Kingsdale slightly edging the MSC site, but it was a very close evaluation. And so I think that really was telling that those probably are the two preferred locations of all the locations we looked at. So what I want to do now is actually dig into these a little bit and show you what's going on each site from how they can be developed with a community center in play. So the first site, while we called it Kingsdale, we're really talking about the Macy site outlined there in that darker orange color. It's approximately a 6-acre site. And if you've been reading the news, and I know most of you probably have because of all the folks I talked to in the focus groups, they were pretty aware of what's going on here. This location has been identified for some future development and is currently being looked at and pretty closely by a local developer. When we look a little bit more closely, you can see that development program taking shape. So you have apartments on the site, over 2-story parking garage. You have senior housing as one of the program elements in the development with a restaurant on the corner. And then you see sitting in here, the community center. And this is about 100,000 square foot community center. You also see there's some office mentioned here, and I'll explain what that means. But you can see how the community center could potentially sit within the site, and it sits right along Tremont Road. How this works is that you would access the site off of Tremont Road would be the primary access point. There's parking under the apartments. First floor would be dedicated mostly for the use of the community center, and then there's some parking under the community center. And then down here where my cursor is, there's additional parking that's been made available through a development agreement with Giant Eagle. So you have surface, garage parking, parking in the facility, and then some surface parking down a little bit farther to the south. As we look at this site in a little bit more detail, we did some blocking and stacking diagrams to illustrate how the community center may take shape. One thing I want to be very clear on, this is very preliminary blocking and stacking. This is not architecture. So, the exact shape, the corners, all of that needs to be figured out. This is really for illustrative purposes. And then you can see these uses and how they layer into the different floors. And I'm going to show you in pretty detail here how those uses take shape in the facility. So taking a look inside, again, this is the community center in the Kingsdale site. Here's Tremont Road. Right here is a reference point. You kind of come in, you maybe enter the garage here. You might enter over here and park here. You might park the lot to the south. First floor is 2 entry points, 1 and 1. And then on the first floor, we would have an aquatic, we'd have a reception. And then we'd have the aquatics on the first floor with a party room for kids' birthdays, family meeting, family get-togethers, and then obviously lockers and changing rooms that go with that on the first floor. Over here, there says office lobby. That's a secondary entrance because on level 6 and 7, there's some office that would be leasable to the private market. That would not be associated necessarily with the community center. I'll explain that when I get up on those floors. Second level, you have fitness. So you got your Nautilus equipment, weights, that typical workout room overlooking the pool. Then you kind of have a group fitness room, talked about the yoga and the Pilates, Zumba, those types of things. All can happen in this group fitness room. That's level 2. As we keep going up, level 3, when we get the hard surfaces coming into the program. So this is essentially 3 full high school basketball courts in the program here. And then there's opportunities for cross access across these basketball courts, making potentially 6 here. And then this is a MAC gym over here. So this is hardwood surface. This would be more of a synthetic surface off in this MAC gym. While you see the lines on there, the idea is that this can be used for a number of things. Volleyball, pickleball. You might even have indoor soccer practice for some youth sports in the MAC gym. If you can think of a hard surface activity, it can probably be programmed into here because these can all be divided with curtains and broken down a lot of different ways. Over here, you have adventure play. So this might be where you have a climbing wall, Ninja Warrior type activities, whatever's hot at the time and people are engaged in, that's what that space would be used for. So moving on, we're moving up to level 4. So you can still see down into the gyms, but then you have a track level. The exact shape of this would be worked out. We're not going to probably have 90-degree angles here. So it'd be a large track that kind of goes around the whole area, and then you kind of have a stretching area in between. So that's level 4. Get up to level 5. This is where you start to see some of the office space. So this would be leasable out into the market. So you might have a variety of users in there from attorney's office, architect's office. It just depends on who would lease that space. You have your senior program on level 5 as well, maybe a cafe, more multi-use rooms here and here, and then a very, very large outdoor patio kind of looking west with great views over the tree line canopy that looks out west there. That'd be level 5. And then as we move up even farther into level 6 and 7, we have a lot of office space. So these floor plates are all office space that are leasable into the market. So, and you can see over here, the access stairs, elevator shaft that would access up into the office, but they'd have their own private access and it wouldn't be connected to the community center. So that is the program for the Kingsdale site if we put the community center here in very loose architectural form. Excuse me. So one thing to point out here is we're at 6 or 7 stories tall. That's in line with the proposed development from Continental on the site. And we don't know if this will be 6 or 7 stories, that's to be determined, but you can see the building heights there that go along with that.
Hey, Aaron, it's Steve. Did you see that we've got a couple questions in the chat on this before we move on?
I'm just gonna take a look at that. Thanks, Steve.
Yeah.
So a couple of questions. Some folks say program looks great. How will it be paid for? We'll get to that, Abby. That's something we'll get to later on in the program. The scale from the schematic drawings to get a sense of the size of the pool. Is the office space going to be like that space over the Walgreens, completely wasted space? So there's a lot of things here that are very much to be determined. We're just showing these loose blocking stacking diagrams at this point. So again, things like the elevators, the exact dimensions of the pool, a lot of those things have not been worked out yet. Really what we're focusing on right now is program and location and how the potential building may sit on the site. So the actual detail, you know, do the gyms have scoreboards? How many elevators do we have? How many steps is it up to the 3rd floor? A lot of those things we don't have worked out yet. So what I'd like to do is keep going. And if Jeff or Debbie, if you could keep monitoring the chat, that would be great. All of your questions in here are really important. I just can't answer them all now, but they will be documented and we'll find a way to get back to the community on this, either through a memo or at the end of the presentation. So moving on to MSC, I think it's important to see both of these in comparison. So this is the MSC site. It's outlined here in that dark orange. You see the existing building here in the center, golf course over here, Trouville to the south. When we started to look at this site, we started with looking at the existing building. Can we save that building? Can it be integrated into the program? We understand there's a lot of folks who really like the building, some quality architecture, has some history there. And as we started to look at it, it just didn't make sense. The push parking out to the edges, it actually forced us to build, you know, a separate parking structure off to the side. And so if this was a site to be considered, the task force made a determination that that building would probably be raised. And when we do that, the existing municipal functions get folded into the building. So this site, unlike the Kingsdale site, has the municipal functions as part of the building. And I'll explain how that works here as I tell the story of this site. One of the other things we heard pretty clearly from the task force was that we really wanted to maintain as much as possible the footprint of the existing structure and parking. We understand this green space has some history. There's some trees here that are memorial-like trees and need to be saved or should be saved. We also understand from a compatibility standpoint with the neighbors over at Trouville that we want to try to maintain this green buffer. And so our task, and it goes back to how can we save the existing building, which became very challenging, was to try to maintain this footprint, this space. And so that was where we started. As we start to look into this building, similar to how we looked at the community center, if it was at Kingsdale, first floor has a couple of things happening here. One, a central parking structure in the middle of the building. So you may enter actually into a lobby here from the parking structure. You may come in this way, drop off, and come into a lobby. Once you're in the main lobby on the first floor, you see this greenish color. That's for the municipal function. So you have this one greeting for the municipal side. You have another greeting for the community center side. And on the first floor, we might have council chambers. You also see the police kind of situated in here. They would be part of the program as well. And then just like Kingsdale program, we have the pool, we have changing rooms, and we have a party room. So this looks a little bit different scale just because of how we presented it on the slide. Both locations, almost the exact same building size and same program. So, you know, the community center is equal on both sites in terms of how much space we're getting in terms of design. Second level, maintain that parking in the core. We have fitness on the second level as well. This is similar to the Kingsdale site, which overlooks the pool. And then you have a municipal program. So you might have Parks and Rec offices, engineering's office, engineering's a separate building, you know, public relations, a variety of things can happen in that second level. And then going up to level 3, similar to the other site, we have the hard surfaces here. This is all the same color, but you have same amount of court space. Notice the MAC gym is labeled right here, and then these would be hardwood surfaces. We also have the senior program at level 3. So that's labeled here. and more of that lavender color. And then we have group fitness. So similar to their location of group fitness rooms, Zumba, Pilates, and then we have an outdoor patio looking to the south. So this has views more towards downtown Columbus, which you probably can see from level 3 here. Go up to level 4, and this is where, again, this is all open air over the gym, and then you have a track that would go around the gymnasiums. We have a little bit more municipal program for conference rooms, additional office space up there. We have a number of multi-use rooms here. That was something we heard from the focus groups today, by the way. We can't get enough meeting space in this building if we tried, because there's a need for meeting space within Arlington. We have another outdoor patio space also that sits up on level 4. So one's actually looking to the south, and then one's looking north over the green space on the point. So that is the full program for this location. This location is only 4 levels. It looks a little bit different because the scale is different.
Aaron, real quick before you. Yeah, hey, Aaron, real quick. We have a question in the chat that maybe you and Nan could address real quick. They're asking what a MAC gym is. Could you guys give a little explanation on the difference between a gym and a MAC gym?
MAC gym really is just the different flooring types. So if you've ever been into a gym that has more of a synthetic rubber surface, that's a MAC gym. It's a little bit more multi-purpose than the other gyms, which would be hardwood surfaces. So MAC gym, oftentimes you see other things programmed in there like soccer and baseball. It's just a little bit more functional for a variety of uses than things you typically see just on a hardwood surface. Thanks, Jeff, for stopping me, making sure I answer that. I'm trying to stay focused on the presentation. So please do that along the way if that ever comes up again. So this is another look at the building, just kind of seeing through. Again, really important reminder, this is not the architecture, simply massing diagrams. You see the pool on level 1 that goes up to level 2, the fitness, level 3, getting the senior programming in there, and then the patio up here on the 4th level together with some of the meeting room space. And then off in the distance, that greenish color is the municipal program. So we're gonna do some talking now. That's enough for me. I'm pretty much done presenting you all the information on purpose of the project. What have we been up to? Where are we at right now in terms of the milestones, which is really the program and the locations. So we wanna know what you think. And so we're gonna try to do a couple of things. We're gonna go into some breakout discussions. We're gonna try to put 8 to 10 people per room, and then we'll bring everybody back together. When we bring you back together, we're gonna administer another poll, asking you maybe which location you prefer best and why, what other type of information do you need moving forward. So that will be in the polling. So as you get into your breakout rooms, the purpose is really just to talk with your community, talk with your neighbors. What did you see? What did you like? Have that little bit more informal conversation before we ask you to take the poll questions.
Aaron, can I, before we go, Margie, before we go into the breakouts, I did want to introduce Nick Lashutka, who is the other co-chair of the task force. He's joined us, and I just wanted to make sure that I recognized him as well.
Thanks, Margie. So Jeff, how long are we going to be in our breakout rooms before we all come back together and take the poll?
So we said we were going to do breakout rooms for about 12 minutes and then give everyone a few minutes to wrap up after that. We did have one specific question, Aaron, if you could, before we go into the next step here. Could you go over the parking maybe a little bit at Kingsdale? We've had a few questions come in on that.
Sure, I can flip back to that real quick. Hopefully I don't get that white screen again. So the parking at Kingsdale, why I flip back before we go to breakout rooms. 3 points of parking here. The first was under the proposed multifamily. That's a large 2-level deck. The second place to park would be there are about 60 spaces actually under the facility. So you would have some parking actually inside the building on the first floor, actually kind of wraps around like that. And then the third point of parking, which I'm going to go all the way back to this slide because I think it's important and great question, is actually on the Giant Eagle surface lot. So that's something that the developer has negotiated with that property owner to the south to facilitate the overall development. So that'd be a shared parking scenario on that lot. And I apologize how slow it is to scroll back here, but I think it's partially because we have so many good community members on the call. Okay, so again, parking inside of here. So you may come in this way, park on the first level of this structure, and then walk over to the community center. There'll be some parking inside of the community center. I think most of that will be reserved for those who need to be close to the facility. And then there's also going to be some parking on the surface right here. So these parking spaces would be dedicated for this development.
So how many total spaces is that, Aaron?
Well, there's a lot of parking here, Margie, right? Because this location, we need more parking because we have the office use, which is a huge driver of parking.
Right.
So all in, just for the community center, I think we're around 350 spaces for that program. But this overall development is a lot of parking.
And I think it's actually 250 for the community center, but it's both sites have that plugged in for parking for the community center. And then there's some additional for the other functions on each site. And then, there's also some just shared parking between those uses. So we think that parking is certainly adequate for the community center and the office on this site, and at MSC, the police and admin functions, as well as the community center.
Yeah, good comment, Ann. Both locations we're not only parking the community center, we're parking the other uses. So it's a little tricky to kind of pull it all apart. We did run this all based on parking standards for Upper Arlington, and then double check that through the Urban Land Institute, and use some of those parking standards to double check ourselves. But we do understand that that's always an important issue. I don't think I've ever worked on a project where parking hasn't come up. So appreciate that comment. So
Aaron and Nan, we do have one other question just to clarify. We had the question, is the program equal space-wise on both sides? If you guys could.
Yes, it is. Equal program. I know it looks a little different just because the scale, how we showed the two sites, looked a little different in graphic form. But yes, the size of the facility, square footage wise, as proposed here is the same. Another good question. So why don't we do this? Why don't we go to breakout rooms, Jeff? We'll come back and we'll take the poll. And I think we can end with a lot more questions as a group, but I just want to make sure we at least get through that piece of the program. Does that sound good?
Sounds good. Yeah, I'm going to send everyone to the rooms now. It's kind of a random mix, and we'll give you about 12 minutes and give everyone a call back in.
So a couple of things that were mentioned here in the chat. I'll just go through a couple while we're all still together for the last 10 minutes or so. Seems like some people felt the program looks great. There are a lot of questions related to just the intricacies of design. So things like the size of the pool, do we have enough elevators, soundproofing was mentioned. There doesn't seem to be enough parking. I know we talked about that in our small group. Another kind of design element that needs to happen. Bicycle parking came up. There doesn't seem to be enough rooms for seniors and activities. Senior space looks too small. That was mentioned in here, looks like twice. Can the office space become something else if necessary? Great question. I would say perhaps, the fact that office space is there, one of the things that we've talked about is if, for example, at Kingsdale, the facility needs to expand, it could potentially expand into that office space. So that could be folded into the program at a later date. So great question there on the office space. And that came from Susan, who was also mentioning, is there demand for office at post-COVID with office space maybe declining? Some questions about restricted building height in the city, which in a minute I might ask Steve or Alyssa, somebody else at the city to answer. And we answered the question on the MAC gym. They don't like the open air above the basketball courts. Reason that that's open is because we need really tall ceiling heights in that space. And so the best thing to do when you need that really tall ceiling height is to create that track above it. So, those ceiling heights could be 30, 36 feet tall to accommodate the sports. Some people like the MSC idea. Again, parking came up. Is it equal space for both? You would think we answered that question. Talked about when it would be completed, so that's looking at December with the final report in January. Somebody wanted to know more about the structures at the Kingsdale site, and I think there's a lot more to come from that through media and through the city as that project keeps moving forward through the city. So another question was asked about possible performance center similar to Dublin. Absolutely. So that came up in actually earlier phase 1 engagement was the idea of a black box theater here. And that certainly can be part of the program. And it was mentioned kind of in that cultural arts space when I talked about culture and arts. And we have a lot of rooms in here that you just saw as kind of purple multi-purpose room meeting rooms. So exactly which room is which and what goes in there is still something that gets worked out as the architecture gets worked out. So feasibility of office space came up again. Is one location more cost effective? Great question. That's the next piece that we're digging into is answering those financing questions. So your task force, Margie, Greg, others have their work cut out for them. And we have our work cut out for us to present back cost to them. So that's next in line in our process here. With multiple projects at Kingsdale, personal development further back in time. I don't think so. Steve, you might want to chime in on that, but I don't think that the development at Kingsdale would necessarily slow down the development of the community center. I think that they probably can happen in concert.
No, and there was another question that was kind of walked me through the timing and basically, and so if the task force comes with an affirmative recommendation to do a community center in December or January, I think the first council has committed to taking something to the voters to allow the voters to say yes or no. The earliest that could happen would be May of 2021. From the point that, so assuming it's a yes, from that point, you got to assume a year for final design, because we're not going to hire an architect to do final design because that gets kind of expensive until we know that we're doing the building. So assume not 9 months to a year for final design, which means you're starting a 2-year construction period in the spring of 22. And so we're open in 24. The timing on the rest of the development with Kingsdale, they'll probably be 6 to 9 months ahead of us, which from a staging standpoint for a development of this scale is about perfect. So we actually got pretty lucky with how that is going to plan out.
Thanks, Steve. And that was a really good question. A couple of people asked that. I think that was most of the questions in the chat.
There was one other question came up in our group about the size of the current senior center and how much space is being provided in this building for seniors. I couldn't remember the numbers, so.
Good question, and that's probably more of a question for Nan or Williams on the square footage. And again, none of the interior actual spaces, how big those boxes are set in stone right now. So part of the feedback that we're getting from you today and that we got through the focus groups is helping us along that path. Dan, did you want to comment on that square footage space?
Yeah, I don't have the program document in front of me, but there's some dedicated space exclusively for senior uses like lounges and some of the social spaces, some meeting spaces. Then there's a lot of shared use spaces like the multi-use purpose, which is multi-use room, which is going to be a big room that's subdividable. So you can have a big banquet in there, like the big luncheon functions that happen at the senior center right now. Some performances, lectures, all kinds of programming that could happen right there. It also has a demonstration kitchen and there's a cafe there as well. So there's billiards, there's all kinds of spaces in the program, and it's not really specifically designed yet. These are like what we call them blocking and stacking diagrams to just kind of show the general relationship. So that's why you're not seeing rooms. I mean, it's hard to get a sense of the scale of those drawings. I don't know if someone was commenting about that on the pool, and the lines on the pool, which were probably less than half the length of the pool, is a 25-yard pool. So it's really hard to get a scale of that, and that's part of what we're going to be doing in the next phase, is developing the design so that we understand better what the sizes of the spaces are and what it starts to look like. And we'll have a lot more data to share kind of at our next meeting as things continue to develop.
Yeah, thanks, ma'am.
There was one question by somebody who asked, is one elevator is not adequate enough for the community center? Will there be just one elevator?
No, there'll be more than one elevator. So there'll be multiple elevators.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah.
A comment from Elliot on the senior center. Thank you, Elliot. So one thing I might ask Jeff to do, or Debbie if she's on here, if you could put in the chat the UA email and website, that would be great, because there is a way between now and the community survey. If you do want to provide additional comments, there is an outlet for that. I believe it's uaoh.net. Yep, thank you for that. Mark's at uaoh.net. So you can send comments there, or you can go to uacommunitycenter.com for other additional information on the project.
Hey, Aaron, there's one other question in the chat that if we got a minute, I'll go ahead and speak to, and that was the question about the demand for office. As we as a city depend on office for our income. It's how we fund a lot of city operations is payroll tax. As we look at the office market, we think what's going to happen is employers are going to have to no longer kind of demand that their employees come to the office, but they're going to have to create office environments that employees want to come to. And so those office environments that are what we'll call amenity rich are going to be the ones that are going to be really successful. I don't know how you get more amenity rich than sitting on top of a community center next to a grocery surrounded by, let's call it 6 or 7 restaurants with 360-degree views to downtown OSU and points north and west. There will be demand for this amount of office in this location.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks for following up on that. Steve, the other question that we had, since we're just maybe have 1 minute or so left, was it was really a question about the office space, and is that city office space? Is the city developing it? Is the city owning it? Can you comment on that?
As much as I would love to move my office to the office space that I just described, no, we will not take that office space for ourselves. In terms of whether we own it or not, that is an open question. We may, just the practicalities of we will own the ground, we will own the senior center.
At the senior center.
We'll own the senior center, which will be part of the community center. We'll own that, and if we own that, it probably makes sense for us to own the office. You could do some crazy financial structures and have somebody else own it. I think there's more risk in that than there is benefit.
Thanks. Great answer, and that clarified. I think that was coming up a couple of different ways. So
yeah.
Well, with that, everybody, I think we're nearing the end of our time. Really appreciated you all being here, getting the feedback today. The transparent process is great. Your city leadership, council, task force is to be commended for that. To have this open dialogue and for everybody to kind of see these comments real time. Again, you saw in the chat how to provide additional comments through email and how to follow along on the website. So with that, as your facilitator, I'll break us for this evening. Thank you again for all for coming, and stay tuned to the process as it keeps going. Thank you so much.